It is the 41st millennium. For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind by the will of the gods, and master of 1,000,000 worlds by the might of his inexhaustible armies. He is a rotting carcass writhing invisibly with power from the Dark Age's technology. He is the Carian Lord of the Imperium, for whom 1,000 souls are sacrificed every day so that he may never truly die. Yet even in his deathless state, the Emperor continues his eternal vigilance. Mighty battle fleets cross the demon-infested miasma of the warp, the only route between distant stars, their way lit by the Astronomicon, the psychic manifestation of the Emperor's will. Vast armies give battle in his name on uncounted worlds. Greatest among his soldiers are the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, bioengineered super warriors. Their comrades in arms are Legion, the Imperial Guard, and countless planetary defense forces, the ever-vigilant Inquisition, and the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, to name only a few. But for all their multitudes, they are barely enough to hold off the ever-present threat to humanity from aliens, heretics, mutants, and far, far worse. To be a man in such times, to be amongst untold billions, it is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. These are the tales of those times. Forget the power of technology and science, for so much has been forgotten, never to be relearned. Forget the promise of progress and understanding, for in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. There is no peace amongst the stars, only an eternity of carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of thirsting gods.
This is the opening quote to Warhammer, the now famous "There is only war" line. These words, to my mind, summarize the universe of Warhammer 40k more perfectly than any others ever could. It is bloody and visceral, filled with pain and horror, and all hope has been lost, and what remains? Only war. May this serve as your first and only warning as we venture into this grim setting. This is an introduction to Warhammer 40,000. The Imperium of Man, the rotting carcass of an interstellar empire, filled with corruption at every level, from the slums of the undergrowth of planet-spanning hive cities to the highest echelons of the High Lords, a zealous dictatorship that hates everything it deems unworthy, exterminating filth wherever it finds it, even its own people. The Imperium is characterized by its religious extremism. The religion of the Imperium is known as the Imperial Cult, or the Cult of the God Emperor, hailing the once leader of humanity as their savior and protector. To live in the Imperium is to live in the darkest and most grim of circumstances. It is to live in a hive of billions, the very air around you polluted to near the point of being unfit for life. Yet you go on, working day after day, doing back-breaking work, all for the barest necessities to be afforded, eating the ground-up corpses of your fellow man turned sustenance for those still drawing breath. But it wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, long forgotten, humanity truly ruled the stars. By our very nature, humans are creatures greedy for resources. This expansionism of ours is what led us to dominate our home planet and eventually the very galaxy itself. Humanity is characterized by its tendency to always be pushing forward, always progressing, pushing our technology further and further still. All this progress would eventually lead us, starting at around the 15th millennium, to what at the time would have been referred to as the Golden Age of Technology, but what in modern days is remembered instead as the Dark Age of Technology. Humanity transitioned into a multiplanetary species. In that time, our numbers would explode by orders of magnitude. Our technology and standard of living would improve to levels previously thought impossible. It saw the development of the first true interstellar human civilization, a sort of stellar confederation centered on the human homeworld of Terra, what we, in the real world, would refer to as Earth. Even tens of millennia later, mankind has not been able to regain the height it would attain during this era. This era began with the Stellar Exodus, humanity's first foray into colonization of other worlds beyond the Solar System, beyond the light of our home star, which began in the 15th millennium AD. Humanity's capacity for colonization was limited at first by the spacecraft of the time, only being able to travel at sublight speeds. This would change with the invention of the warp drive. The warp drive, a device invented around the 18th millennium, marked the true beginning of the age of technology. The device allows for faster than light travel by creating a shortcut through space. It does this by performing short jumps through an, at this time recently discovered, extra-dimensional realm known as the Imperium, or more commonly known as the warp. Traveling through the warp, however, was itself a treacherous affair, with many risks involved, leading to the invention of the Geller field, a sort of protective shield against the warp's influences. The development of the warp drive surely accelerated humanity's progress, and the colonization of stars soon began. Humanity would come to encounter many alien species. We are going to touch a bit later on how those were dealt with. Another vital development of this time was the creation of the psychic navigator gene, a sort of mutation to the human genome, which altered the human in many ways. The most outwardly obvious is the third eye, which itself is a sign of the actual mutation caused by the gene. A mild psychic extrasensory perception which could see into the maddening currents of the warp and navigate a course through the realm, finally made for safe, faster than light travel. In this age, humanity would come to create many astonishing and terrifying things, from weapons that would snuff out entire stars in an instant, to perfecting medicine and unlocking the secrets of the human genome. By far, one of the greatest things to come out of this age would also be its downfall, the Men of Iron. The Men of Iron were humanity's perfected AI, true AI, used as servants to humanity to do tasks such as menial work. The Men of Iron would one day come to rebel against humanity, leading to a devastating war, a war which would wipe out a large portion of the human population. Humanity would survive, however, and subsequently all development of AI would be outlawed, lest the past repeat itself. With humanity now weakened by war, a new wave of sudden changes would arrive, humanity's psychic awakening. It started out small, with some humans developing psychic abilities, magic, like in the fairy tales of old. But these powers came at a terrible cost, and only now would humanity truly begin to realize what they had been messing with. See, magic in Warhammer 40,000 works differently from other universes. Magic is the ability to alter reality to one's will. The warp, the realm we mentioned previously, is the realm of the souls. All souls reside in it, and thus all emotions, hopes, and aspirations do as well. Some people, the so-called psychers, have a really strong connection between their soul in the warp and their physical form, allowing them to project those desires of theirs from the warp into real space in the form of magic. But the warp is an insidious realm full of dangers. In it reside entities called demons, and the gods who created them. The gods of chaos, at this point in time, around the 20th millennium, existed 3 of them, those being, in no particular order, Grandfather Nurgle, god of diseases, despair, and decay. The blood god Khorne, god of war, wrath, murder, and blood. And Tzeentch, god of chains and sorcery. These chaos gods are in truth not divine, yet their power is unmatched, and to mortals, that makes little difference. Each of these gods is fed and grows in power not only by worship, but also by acts that would fall into their domain. All murder and bloody massacre feeds Khorne, all deaths feed Nurgle, and all schemes feed Tzeentch. And soon there would also come another. See, while all this was happening with humanity, there were other alien races, like we mentioned earlier. One of the most prominent alien races of the time was the previous galactic superpower, the Eldar. Psychic elves created as warriors by the Great Old Ones. And look, we really don't have time to explain all of this. In short, great godly psychic toadmen made the elves to fight space Egyptian skeletons and their star-eating gods. Maybe we'll touch on this more in another episode. For now though, the Eldar had ruled the galaxy unchallenged for hundreds of millennia. They had perfected their technology and society and eliminated all worries from their existence. As such, to find new avenues to entertain themselves and keep busy. So, of course, they turned to the arts, creating great music and plays. But as a long-living race, that too quickly turned sour. Thus the Eldar as a race turned entirely to debauchery and vice. At first it was sex, then drugs. Then it devolved more and more into heinous acts of torture and twisted and depraved pleasure. The Eldar as a race also possessed heightened emotions. Simple joy to an Eldar is like the joy felt by 10 men at the height of their lives. The sadness of an Eldar is like the sadness felt by tens of humans at their lowest of lows. Of course, this cycle of torment and intense emotions being reflected into the warp at tenfold the intensity that of a human's began gathering. It grew and grew and grew for millennia until finally it coalesced into a new entity, the fourth and, for now final, Chaos God, Slaanesh, the Dark Prince, she who thirsts. The birth of Slaanesh came at a bad time for the entire galaxy. The 25th millennium marks many events in the galaxy of Warhammer. The fall of the Age of Technology, beginning of the Age of Strife for humanity, the fall of the Eldar to Slaanesh, and the opening of the Eye of Terror. But before that, I'm sure you are wondering what happened to those Eldar things. The birth of Slaanesh is the single most destructive event in all of Eldar history. Slaanesh, having been birthed of the reflection of the Eldari souls, had a particular affinity for them. Thus, when they were birthed, Slaanesh hungered, and would satiate his hunger by hunting down and devouring Eldar souls. The Eldar population was decimated. Entire star systems of Eldar colonies wiped out in moments. The only surviving Eldar were those conservative few who, seeing the depravity of their fellow elves, decided to distance themselves from it, crafting massive planet-sized arcs called craft worlds and sailing far from the Eldar worlds, as well as those who had retreated into the Eldar's webway. Now, you may be asking, what is the webway? You see, in all faster than light travel in 40k is done by going in and out of the warp, but all the races do it in different ways. For the Eldar, they have created an infinitely complex system of entirely safe tunnels through the warp called the webway. The webway, like all the warp, is both infinite and tiny. Some Eldar, in the face of destruction, managed to retreat into the webway, where they would continue to deprave themselves further and further. Now, in safety from the clutches of She Who Thirsts, as well as the judgment of other Eldar, eventually splitting from the rest of the race and becoming the Dark Eldar, or Drukhari, a race of depraved deviants who act as pirates on the open seas of the galaxy, taking slaves back to their impossible city of Komora. The final Eldar group to survive the fall were the Harlequins, chosen protected of the laughing god Shegorak. The Eldar had their own deities, an entire pantheon of them in fact, separate from the dark gods of chaos. Slanesh devoured them too, however, the only one surviving being Cain, the Eldar god of war, who was fractured into Gestalt avatars who reside into the infinity circuits of the Eldar craftworlds. Isha, Eldar goddess of life, birth, and fertility, who was rescued from the clutches of Slanesh by the grandfather himself, and who now resides in his realm, the Gardens of Nurgle, safe from the Perfect Prince. Finally, Shegorak, the Laughing God, who survived by relocating his entire realm into the webway, then turning the infinite winding tunnels of the webway into a labyrinth, a defense against any intrusion. There, in the Black Library, the collective of all knowledge in the galaxy, Shegorak took his followers, entrusting them with guarding this realm, while he hatched his plans to one day free the Eldar from Slanesh. Because of the connection between the Eldar and She Who Thirsts, all Eldar who die go to her. Each of the three main factions of the Eldar combat this in different ways. The Craftworld Eldar take their souls and reroute them into the Ark's Infinity Circuit, where they will power the vessel as well as machines of war called Wraith constructs. The Drukhari stave off Slanesh by extending their lives by thousands of years by performing heinous acts and feeding off of them, rejuvenating themselves. Finally, the Harlequins are under the aegis of their god. Returning back to humanity, the Dark Age of technology came to a violent end as the birth of the Chaos God Slanesh created a massive rift at the center of the galaxy, known as the Eye of Terror. The Eye is a tear in physical space into the Imperium. With the opening of the Eye, a new calamity befell the galaxy. Massive warp storms. Massive waves of psychic energies and warp matter scattered into the galaxy, blanketing planets, making them completely impassable and inaccessible. This would come to be known as the Age of Strife, also called Old Night, an era marked with apocalyptic events and the fragmentation of human interstellar civilization. The Age of Strife saw many planets that had become living paradises fall into chaos, becoming wastelands where tech was the only thing keeping people alive. The Old Night would come to an end in the early 30th millennium and see the rise of a new power for humanity. The turn of the 30th millennium saw the coming of the Emperor of Man. But who is this Emperor? I hear you asking. Remember those Psykers we mentioned earlier? The Emperor was a Psyker as well, in fact the most powerful psychic being in all the galaxy, more powerful than even Eldar Psykers, and Eldar are an entirely psychic race. By far, the Emperor's most prominent psychic power had to have been his foresight. Many beings in this galaxy can foresee the future, but almost always it is imperfect. They seeing multiple possible futures, as the future is not set in stone. The Emperor's foresight was nearly perfect. He was able to see all possible futures and take all the necessary actions to lead himself and humanity by extension to the most ideal future possible. To add to this, the Emperor was what is known as a perpetual. Perpetuals are beings that cannot truly die. Even the most grievous of wounds would rapidly heal, And even if somehow they were killed, they would simply return to life in a short amount of time. Not only that, the Emperor was a towering figure, 4 meters tall, beautiful, and wreathed in a psychic golden halo of flame. He wore perfect golden armor and carried the most powerful weapons humanity had seen up to this point. And as if all that wasn't enough, the Emperor was also a brilliant mind. Having lived for tens of thousands of years, he'd accumulated a massive amount of knowledge, making him one of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. A scientist versed in machines and bioengineering, the Emperor was capable of things previously thought impossible. This is the Emperor. This is the Emperor. But also not really. You see, the Emperor, for all the things he was, he had an even greater amount of things he wasn't. Or rather, things we didn't know he was. For you see, the Emperor, though being the most high-profile being in the galaxy, was also super secretive, always keeping his plans close to chest, lest anyone catch on to what he was up to. In truth, the Emperor didn't just appear out of nowhere in the year 30,000, but was an ancient being who's been guiding humanity from the shadows ever since the very start of human civilization. And I'll go on a bit of a side note here. Of the few things we do know the Emperor, we know he never made himself known before the 30th millennium. But we do know that he was Saint George of Christian lore, or rather that he slew a dragon. The dragon was a large accumulation of shards of the Catan the Void Dragon, which he defeated and sealed in a labyrinth underneath the surface of Mars. You should remember this for later. Now where was I? Yes. He was perfectly content with leaving humanity to lead itself, just with his unseen guidance. But all those massive disasters, one right after the other, had weakened humanity to the point it threatened our very existence. So the Emperor took decisive action to bring humanity to a new galactic superpower. The Emperor took charge of humanity, ushering in a new age, the Unification Wars. The Emperor's force was small, but it was something humanity, and indeed the galaxy, had never seen before. The Emperor had created a new type of human, or rather superhuman, almost 3 meters tall and built like no one else. The Emperor had genetically engineered super soldiers out of the population of Terra. The transformation made them larger, stronger, faster, but also prone to violence and later on uncontrollable. These were the Emperor's Thunder Warriors, the army with which he would reunite the fractured Earth. The Emperor also abolished all religion, imposing an atheist dogma on the population. Why? The answer would be revealed much later. For now though, the Emperor, having reunited Terra, was planning to begin reuniting the entirety of the previous galaxy-spanning human federation, now under the banner of his Imperium of Man, the core ideal of which was the Emperor's personal belief coined the Imperial Truth. At its heart, the Imperial Truth held that the universe was rational, that knowledge defeated fear and brought freedom from the terrors of old night. This assertion went the denial of the irrational, the superstitious, and faith in powers and principles, beyond the knowable. In the unified Terra and Imperium of Man, there would be no mysteries of the soul, no sorcery, no gods. Those who clung to their ignorance were cast down, their lies silenced in the pyre's roar. The terrors of the past had grown in the shadow of superstition and false religious belief. In the human future, if the human future was to survive its rebirth, it could not tolerate the delusions of the past. For now, though, the Emperor had a different fire to put out, one of his own making. Remember those Thunder Warriors? Well, after the wars on Terra were no more, they were weapons without purpose. Knowing little more than fighting, they began undoing the progress the Emperor had made. They proved to be volatile and unreliable tools, far too unreliable for the Emperor's plan, so they were purged. But just what kind of a creature can wipe out such powerful beings? The answer? An even greater one. See, the Thunder Warriors weren't really the Emperor's first attempt at genetic engineering. As a matter of fact, he had already perfected the process before he even began making the first ever Thunderer. He had created a perfect human being, 3 meters tall, beautiful, strong, fast, with perfect reflexes and a perfect mind. These were the Emperor's finest creations, the Custodes. His own personal guard, hence the name. The Custodes are, and will continue to be, the very best and most elite fighting force in the entire Imperium, potentially even the galaxy. For there are few things that can even stand up to the might of a Custode, let alone match them. The process to create even one, however, was extremely hard and costly beyond belief. So much so that even in modern day 42nd Millennium Imperium, which possesses over 1 million planets and all the resources in the galaxy, only 10,000 of these Custodes can even exist. For context, the Imperium at the same time hosts over 12 trillion guardsmen. The Custodes would make quick work of the Thunderers, wiping each and every one of them out from the galaxy as well as history. They hunted them with extreme efficiency and cruelty, but they always made sure to kill them fast and to not prolong their suffering. The Custodes considered the Thunderers their brothers, after all. This would become a permanent stain in the hearts of each and every Custodian. For now, though, the Emperor began making new plans. He could not conquer the galaxy alone. He needed generals to lead his armies in his stead, even in the furthest reaches of the galaxy. For that purpose, he would seek the help of 2 individuals, 2 women, known as Erda and Amar Astarte, powerful perpetuals both. Being a perpetual is a lonely existence. You can never really make bonds, no matter how hard you try. Sooner or later, everyone you know and have come to love will fade away into nothing, but you will remain. So the only people to truly ever keep you company would be other perpetuals, though they are rare. This is what happened with the Emperor as well. He kept in his company various other powerful perpetuals, such as the 2 mentioned previously, and by far his closest friend and personal right-hand man, Malcador the Sigillite. The Emperor would combine his genes with those of Erda to create 20 genetically perfect beings, 20 sons, the Primarchs. The Primarchs were by far the Emperor's proudest work, his and Erda's sons, his generals. As they grew inside their gestation pods, he would gather a sample of each of their genes, and with the brilliance of Amar Astarte, they would create a new kind of super warrior, one slightly less powerful than the Thunder Warriors before them, but far more intelligent and above all else obedient. They crafted the gene seed, an organ which, when implanted along with various others inside of young male children, they would begin to mutate them over time to grow into adulthood as powerful new beings, genetic sons of the Primarchs. This new type of superhuman would come to be known as Astartes, or better yet, as Space Marines. Quote by the Emperor himself.
They shall be my finest warriors, these men who give themselves to me. Like clay I shall mold them, and in the furnace of war forge them. They will be of iron will and steely muscle. In great armor shall I clad them, and with the mightiest guns will they be armed. They will be untouched by plague or disease, no sickness will blight them. They will have tactics, strategies, and machines such that no foe can best them in battle. They are my bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They are my space marines, and they shall know no fear.
All these plans, however, would come to a halt when Erda find out the Emperor's plans for their children. As any mother, Erda loved her sons and had the instinct to protect them. So, in desperation, she would open a warp rift in the gestation room and launch the steel infant Primarchs into the warp, like Yahavet with Moses. The torrents of the warp would scatter the Primarchs across the galaxy. Now scattered, and in the mind of Erda safe, she had to flee, lest the Emperor unleash his wrath upon her. But that wrath she had come to expect of the Conqueror of Earth never came. Instead, the Emperor, changing his plans, would build up his armies and begin the conquest anew, so ushering in the age of the Great Crusade. And that is unfortunately where the end of today's story. I'm sorry to have to cut it short, but the universe of 40k simply has too much lore to cover in a single video, and still keep the video a reasonable length. So, I'm going to make a proposition. Leave a like and a comment down below if you want me to make a part 2 to this video, and continue our dive into 40k with the Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, and more. Okay, bye!